If you've been thinking about doing a 1031 exchange, don't do it until you watch this video. This is Gia Silva with INTI Realty, your trusted real estate advisor here in Long Beach. And today we have Lisa Hallaian, and we're gonna be speaking all about 1031 exchanges. When is it a good time to do a 1031 exchange? Who can benefit from a 1031 exchange? And what are the timelines that you need to keep in mind when you've decided to go ahead and sell your property and do 1031 exchange? Lisa is a senior wealth advisor with Newport Advisory, and every day she's managing people's portfolios, discussing their wealth. Today, we're gonna discuss everything about 1031 exchanges, so let's dive into it. Lisa, let's get right into it. So, Lisa, what is a 1031 exchange?
Well, it's a transaction. It is a way to defer capital gains on real estate property. The great thing about a 1031 exchange is that you can actually have all the benefits of real estate with your exchange. You're just deferring that taxation, so that's really the benefit along with it.
Who would this be for?
Right.
And when to do it and why?
Those of us that live in California, it's really a great option for us because our taxes are naturally so high. Just as a ballpark, it's anywhere from 35 to 40% of the gains are taxed.
Okay.
So that's a big number, so almost half. And I think a lot of real estate owners don't realize how big that tax burden becomes and how much of your profit is really eaten up by the taxes. If you are looking to defer the taxation on that, it is a good option for you. California is unique because it's a growth state, not an income producing state. Cap rates are not what they used to be. We also have experienced an incredible increase in valuations here in the state of California in particular and across the country. And so it is probably a good idea if you feel that you've pretty much have realized a great gain in your property. The question becomes, how much further will that gain expand? And it may not be expanding. So that would be another reason as well. It's really designed for property owners that are owners of investment property. They are owners of rental income properties, vacation properties. Income is really the key to that, but also it can include land and oil rights as well. But if it's your own personal residence, then it's not eligible for a 1031 exchange.
Is there a specific time that a property owner needs to own a building, own a rental property before they consider a 1031 exchange?
Yeah, we believe that 24 months of ownership and collecting income is a very good rule of thumb. I know there's those that have done it under 24 months, but if it's 24 months, we know that your chances of being audited is very slim.
And when would you say is not a good time to do a 1031 exchange?
There's a time crunch. So when you sell a property, you have 45 days in which to identify those properties for a 1031 exchange, which does not mean that you have to go through with the transaction by then, but you have to identify those properties. Then the state of California, the IRS, they give you 180 days to complete the transaction. So go through escrow, the funding, all of that. The challenge is really the 45 days. Many people want to do a 1031 exchange to avoid taxes, but because of that 45 days, they usually make a mistake and they identify the wrong properties, they rush into purchases. So you need to have the right people involved, the qualified intermediary. You have to have your realtor on board, your real estate broker, so that they know that your intention is to do a 1031 exchange. So it's a team, really, and everybody has to be involved because you want to make sure that the escrow company knows that you're doing a 1031 exchange. If you need the money, it's probably not a good idea to do a 1031 exchange. What's important to note is that when you sell a property and you want to do a 1031 exchange, it's dollar for dollar. If you have, let's use a number of $2 million as the property value, you sell the property for $2 million, but you have a $500,000 loan on the property, you have debt of $500,000. The IRS says even though the bank is going to be repaid during escrow, that $500,000, you still have to roll over into an exchange or exchange the full $2 million, minus closing costs, of course.
The full amount.
The full amount. And if you don't, we call it boot, and that boot is taxable. So in order to avoid that, you have to roll the entire amount. Now, you can buy or exchange for a property that's lower. You can add more than one property, so you can have a property that's $1 million or $1.5 million, and another property that's $500,000.
So, okay, 45 days to identify the property, and then a total of 180 days to do the whole entire transaction and close successfully.
And that includes the 45 days, weekends and holidays.
Got it. 45 days to identify, right? To identify the property. It's tough right now. It's very, very tough.
It's tough.
Because it's such a competitive market, even for cash buyers as well.
Just because you identify that property doesn't mean that that property is going to be available. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you don't have something to exchange into. A lot of times sellers need some cash, so they may decide that they're not going to roll the entire amount over if they're going to take a certain cash out amount, which is fine, but that's taxable.
Let's say someone identifies a property. They're into escrow, but then they back out.
When you do have a situation with escrow, it becomes a problem.
Okay, the clock doesn't begin again if it falls out of escrow.
No, and if you go over 45 days, there's no way to work around that. And that's why your escrow has to know that you have a 1031 exchange in mind.
Okay.
Because you cannot have that money go into any other type of it has to be a specific type of escrow account because the IRS considers that you've touched it.
Yeah.
You cannot touch the money because then it's not qualified for the exchange.
Okay, Lisa, someone wants to do a 1031 exchange. They are selling a 3-unit building. What can they exchange to?
So they can exchange to a like-for-like property.
Okay.
Let's say a couple of duplexes or a duplex, a commercial building.
Okay.
They can exchange into land.
Okay.
They can exchange into oil and gas rights. They can exchange into a retail storefront. It could be a lot of different things, multi-use.
Okay.
The only thing that really is not acceptable, so if you were going to buy a single-family home, you cannot exchange into that home with the intention of moving into it yourself.
Got it.
Unless it's after 2 years. So you cannot buy a primary residence or exchange into a primary residence.
So Lisa, I'm speaking to a lot of property owners where they have actually lived for decades in the property where they also, partially rent their property. They're living in one unit, let's say in a duplex, a triplex, or a fourplex, and they've been living in one unit, and then the other ones they've been renting out. How are they about to go to a 1031 exchange?
That is totally appropriate and acceptable by the IRS.
Okay.
But it's not 100% exchangeable. There's a way that they would calculate the part that they're living in by square footage and that sort of thing. And that would be excluded from the total dollar amount for the exchange. The way taxes are today at these levels, it still makes sense to do an exchange.
So what we learned today about 1031 exchanges is that it is a great vehicle if you've been thinking about selling an investment property and avoiding capital gains. Also, if you have been living in one of your investment properties or an income-producing property, you can also do a partial 1031 exchange. We've also learned about the timeline of a 1031 exchange. We know you need 45 days to identify a property and a total of 180 days to identify a property, get into escrow, go through a transaction, and close escrow. Now, this includes weekends and holidays as well. And there you have it. I hope you learned something today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.